In the summer of 1942, British soldiers dug into the sand of North Africa were told something no army wants to hear about its enemy. Don't say his name too often. It was making him a legend. His own name had become a weapon. That man was Erwin Rommel, and before this war destroyed him, he would earn something almost no enemy commander in history has ever earned: the open respect and admiration of the men trying to kill him. This is the story of a general so effective, so honorable in a war defined by atrocity, that his enemies mourned him, and his own leader ordered him to die. Erwin Rommel was not born into the Prussian military aristocracy that produced most of Germany's top commanders. He was the son of a school teacher, a middle-class boy from Swabia with no natural claim to greatness. What he had instead was an instinct for war that seemed almost inborn. In the First World War, as a young infantry officer in the mountains of Italy, Rommel did something that should have been impossible. Leading a small detachment, he outmaneuvered and captured an entire Italian regiment, thousands of men, using speed, deception, and audacity instead of numbers. It was a preview of everything he would become. By the time the Second World War began, Rommel was commanding Hitler's own bodyguard battalion. He wanted a real fight. He got one, and it would make him the most famous general on either side of the war. In 1941, Hitler sent Rommel to North Africa to rescue a collapsing Italian army. What he built there, with a fraction of the men and supplies the British had, became one of the most studied military campaigns of the 20th century. Rommel didn't fight the way the textbooks said to fight. He struck where he wasn't expected. He used the desert itself, its emptiness, its silence, its lack of cover, as a weapon. He would appear 100 miles from where British intelligence had placed him, hit hard, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. The British gave him a nickname soaked in reluctant respect: the Desert Fox. Not because he was cruel, because he was almost impossible to catch. At the Battle of Gazala in 1942, badly outnumbered, Rommel encircled and shattered British armored divisions in a matter of days, then pushed all the way to El Alamein, deep into Egypt, closer to the Suez Canal than any German commander would ever get again. What made Rommel different wasn't just his tactics, it was how he fought. In a war where the SS was already committing atrocities behind the lines, Rommel refused illegal orders. He did not execute prisoners of war. He did not target civilians. Captured British soldiers spoke of being treated with unusual decency under his command. This reputation reached all the way to London. In the House of Commons, Winston Churchill, Britain's own wartime leader, stood up and described Rommel as a great general, careful to add that greatness did not excuse the damage he'd done, but refusing to deny it either. It remains one of the only times in the war that a British Prime Minister publicly praised an enemy commander by name. British General Claude Auchinleck grew so worried about Rommel's mythical status among his own troops that he issued a formal directive ordering officers to stop referring to the enemy simply as Rommel. Every victory, every retreat, every setback was being credited to one man, as if the entire Afrika Korps was just an extension of his will. In a strange way, Rommel had become more feared as an idea than as an army. But North Africa was a campaign built on borrowed time. Rommel's genius could win battles. It could not fix Germany's broken supply lines. Fuel, tanks, and reinforcements that should have reached him were delayed, diverted, or destroyed at sea. In late 1942, a new British commander arrived, Bernard Montgomery, methodical, patient, and, for the first time, backed by overwhelming supplies and intelligence. At the Second Battle of El Alamein, Montgomery did what no one had managed before. He ground Rommel down, refused to be baited into a fast war of maneuver, and broke the Afrika Korps through sheer weight of material. Rommel, exhausted and ill, had to watch his army, the finest force he ever commanded, retreat across 1,000 miles of desert it had once conquered. North Africa was lost. And so, slowly, was Germany's war.
By 1944, Rommel was back in Europe, commanding the defense of France against the coming Allied invasion. He saw, more clearly than most German officers dared to admit, that the war was unwinnable. Continuing to fight for Hitler meant continuing to destroy Germany itself. It was in this period that Rommel's name became tied to the most dangerous conversation in the Third Reich, the plot to remove Hitler from power. Historians still debate exactly how deep his involvement went. What is certain is that Rommel was in contact with officers who were actively planning the July 20th assassination attempt, and that afterward, under interrogation, several conspirators named him as a man who knew and who might have accepted power if Hitler had fallen. For a regime built on absolute loyalty, that was enough.
On October the 14th, 1944, two generals arrived at Rommel's home with a choice disguised as an offer. He could face trial for treason, a trial that would destroy his family and his name, or he could take a cyanide capsule and be given a hero's funeral with the official story blaming battle wounds for his death. Rommel chose the poison. Germany was told its greatest general had died of complications from injuries sustained in an Allied air attack. He was given a full state funeral. Hitler even sent a wreath. The truth that Rommel had been forced to kill himself by the very government he had served was hidden from the public for years. What makes Rommel's story endure isn't just North Africa or the Desert Fox legend. It's the uncomfortable question it leaves behind. How does a man become one of the most respected commanders in the eyes of his enemies while serving one of history's most murderous regimes? And what does it mean that the same government he fought for was the one that ultimately silenced him? There are no clean answers. Only a life that reminds us war rarely divides people as neatly into heroes and villains as we'd like.
If you want more deep dives into the commanders, campaigns, and turning points that shaped modern warfare, subscribe to War and Military History. New documentaries drop regularly, and a short preview goes up every evening before the full story arrives. Where every conflict has a cause, every border has a cost, and every war leaves something behind.